Dobro večer. Gost emisije Uživo iz Amerike, danas John Sitilides, analitičar i geopolitičar, čovek koji je redovan gost na mnogim američkim televizijama, novinama, kao što su od televizije CNN, BBC, zatim Bloomberg News, Fox News, One America News, New York Times, Washington Post, Washington Times i mnogi drugi američki mediji. On će biti naš gost večeras u jednom momentu koji je jako važan, prevashodno za ceo svijet, a to je pobeda Donalda Trumpa na izborima, gde smo dobili 47. američkog predsjednika sada zvanično. I mnogi postavljaju pitanje koliko će zapravo ova pobeda Donalda Trumpa i kako uticati na nas u Srbiji. I zato je John Sitilides naš večerašnji gost. John, good evening.
Good evening. It's a pleasure to be with you and with your audience today.
It's a very big honor to talk with you because I know your wonderful biography and it's amazing.
Thank you.
The first question of this interview is, American presidential. What do you think about victory of Donald Trump?
It was surprisingly decisive. I think there was great concern in recent weeks that we would have a much tighter race, whether it was a Kamala Harris victory or a Donald Trump victory. And looking back at what happened in 2020, the concern also that it might be extended for several days before we knew who the winner would be. And the fact that it was declared within hours of the closing of the polls, I think comes as a great relief to most Americans that we have a return to normalcy with our elections and we don't have a president declared 5 days after Election Day. It's quite decisive. He's won the Senate also. We'll see what happens with the balance of the House of Representatives. And it looks like we will have a mandate for a very Trumpian domestic and foreign policy for at least the next 2 years when we have the next Senate and congressional elections.
And what do you think about his victory when we compare with our country, with Serbia? How it can affect the Serbs? The victory of the Donald Trump, about the most important issue on the south part of our country. You know what I mean?
I do. And I think it's very important for the Serbian people to understand that it's not just a matter of what President Trump knows and doesn't know, but what his advisors know. And the fact that Ambassador Rick Grenell, who may become the national security advisor, I don't know, maybe even nominated for Secretary of State.
What was John Bolton, for example?
Well, John Bolton will be nowhere. He'll be nowhere in the Trump administration. But Rick Grenell, who actually helped to arrange the most recent negotiations between Serbia and Kosovo, has the ear of President Trump. He's a very trusted advisor on national security issues, and the degree to which the Serbian government maintains good relations with people like Rick Grenell and others who are going to be advising President Trump means that Serbia probably will have a friend in the White House.
Yes. Yeah, Richard Grenell is well known in Serbia in every way. But I want to ask you something also about Kamala. Kamala didn't say anything about victory of Donald Trump. She's gone. She's gone. We couldn't hear anything about her in America since yesterday evening. Why is that?
I don't know what the internal thinking is in Kamala Harris's campaign. My understanding is that she'll be giving a concession speech sometime later this afternoon. Probably they're in deep shock inside the Harris campaign. They may have been overly confident about her chances of winning. Being defeated by anyone is difficult for anyone in political office. But I think given how intense the animosity was between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris, it's especially difficult for her losing to someone that she claims was a fascist and is going to be a dictator, and yet won the approval of not only the Electoral College, but possibly even the popular vote. So I think it really exposes the lie in her campaign. Instead of arguing with Trump on policy issues, she attacked him on character, and she was defeated. And I think that's very difficult for anyone to overcome.
Yes, but we'll see what will happen with China. You know, a lot of opinions of Donald Trump about the China. Donald Trump doesn't like the China.
Well, if we recall again the first Trump administration, he maintained that he had a good talking relationship, a good working relationship with Xi Jinping, that they were trying to work out a major trade deal that could benefit the American economy, and also reassure China that we were not seeking to promote the independence of Taiwan in a way that would be provocative to the Communist Party of China. But with the COVID pandemic, and the lack of trust on the part of Xi Jinping and Donald Trump in the world. I mean, frankly, if we're honest, they deliberately unleashed. Once they were infected in China, they made sure everyone else in Europe and in North America and the rest of the world was also contaminated with COVID. And I think that broke the trust between Donald Trump and Xi Jinping. And now I think he may not have 200% tariffs on Chinese goods, but there'll be very, very serious and very tough negotiations to protect American national security, technology, and our medical and personal protective equipment and health issues from Chinese dominance and control over supply chains.
And also, if we're talking about American policy, what do you think? Does Donald Trump have a clear policy regarding NATO?
Regarding?
NATO.
You know, again, I think a lot of what he says is a matter of posturing for negotiation purposes. Will he really see to it that the U.S. would not defend a country that does not put in 2% of GDP? I don't know. It depends. If it were a threat to Germany, it's one thing. If it's a threat to Montenegro, it could be another issue. We don't know. I think what's very important is Donald Trump wants every country, first of all, to be able to provide the necessary resources to defend itself. Not expect the American taxpayer to defend foreign countries, but for America to partner with every country in NATO. So when a country like Poland puts in 4% of GDP to defend itself, that raises it in the eyes of Donald Trump. When a country like Spain or Italy spends 1%, that lowers that country's security in the eyes of Donald Trump.
How it goes now, Joe Biden needs to go from White House in helicopter. That is traditional here in America.
Well, it'll be very interesting what happens on January 20th, on the inauguration day.
What is the scenario?
We'd like to think, we hope that we have a peaceful, respectful transfer of power. And ideally, Kamala Harris on January 6th will oversee the Senate counting the Electoral College, even though it means her defeat, and that Joe Biden will actually be at the Trump inaugural. I don't know, though, because the relations right now are so raw, so hostile between Trump on one side and both Biden and Harris on the other. I don't know that they want to be in the same place as him.
But for me, it's more important how is the relation between Biden and Kamala?
That's a very good question. I don't know that we'll know for months what the actual nature of that is. Our understanding is that the Bidens remain very resentful that Joe Biden was pushed out of the re-election campaign back in July. But ultimately, it was his decision, and he has to accept responsibility for it. You can't blame somebody else for your decision. It's his.
Thank you a lot. It was my pleasure to talk with you.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Always, always. Za emisiju Uživo iz Amerike gost večerašnji bio je John Sitilides, analitičar i geopolitičar, čuveni ovde u Americi.